After 8 years of marriage, Korean mafia boss said he didn't want her anymore. Then he regretted it. Welcome back to Afro Drama Stories. I don't want you anymore. 5 words. Jang Woo-sung delivered them the same way he conducted business negotiations, with absolute finality and zero emotion. He didn't even look up from the documents spread across his mahogany desk. The pen in his hand continued moving, signing off on transactions worth millions, while his wife of 8 years stood frozen in the doorway of his study. Maria's fingers tightened around the tea tray she'd brought him. The delicate porcelain cups trembled slightly, but her face remained perfectly composed. 8 years of marriage to Korea's most feared underworld figure had taught her how to hide every emotion behind a mask of serene acceptance. "The girls are asleep," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. "I thought you might want tea before bed." "I need a son, Maria." Woo-sung finally looked up, and his eyes held nothing. No warmth, no regret, just cold calculation. 8 years. For daughters. My mother was right. This marriage was a mistake. The tray didn't fall. Maria set it down carefully on the side table, her movements deliberate and controlled. She'd negotiated million-dollar deals with men twice her size. She'd stood beside him during police raids. She'd held his hand through betrayals that would have broken lesser men. But nothing had prepared her for this. "I want a divorce," he continued, returning his attention to the papers. "My lawyers will contact you tomorrow. You'll be provided for, of course. But the girls stay with me until arrangements are made." Maria stood there for exactly 3 seconds. Then she turned and walked out, closing the door with a soft click that somehow felt louder than a slam. This man had lost everything. Not to bullets, not to rival gangs, not to the law. He lost it all to pride. And by the time he realized what he'd done, it was far too late. But to understand how a powerful man could destroy himself so completely, we need to go back. Back to when Jang Woo-sung believed he was invincible, and Maria believed love could conquer anything. 9 years earlier, Maria Washington had never planned to fall in love with a criminal. She'd come to Seoul with clear goals: expand her family's import-export business into Asian markets, master Korean business culture, and build an empire that would make her father proud. Her mother had warned her about men with dangerous eyes and dangerous smiles, men who made promises they couldn't keep. She should have listened. The night she met Woo-sung, Maria had been closing a deal at an upscale restaurant in Gangnam. The negotiation had gone well, and she was celebrating with her team when 3 men in bloodied suits burst through the back entrance. Chaos erupted. Her clients scattered. Security moved in. But Maria didn't run. Years of watching her father negotiate with difficult personalities had taught her to read people, to see past the surface. And what she saw in the injured man's eyes wasn't random violence. It was calculated survival. "Clear the room," one of the men barked in Korean. "Now." "I paid for this private dining room until midnight," Maria replied in perfect Korean, not moving from her seat. The surprise in their eyes was brief but noticeable. "And my contract says I don't have to leave early." The injured man, Woo-sung, looked at her with an intensity that should have frightened her but didn't. Blood seeped through his jacket, but his posture was controlled. Alert. "You speak Korean," he said. It wasn't a question. "Fluently. I also speak Mandarin, Japanese, and 3 other languages. It's good for business." Maria gestured to his shoulder. "That wound needs attention. There's a private clinic 2 blocks from here. I know the owner." "Why would you help me?" "Because you're bleeding on my celebration dinner, and I'd rather you not die and turn this into a crime scene. Bad for my reputation." She stood, gathering her things. "Plus, you interest me. Anyone who can walk in here looking like that and still maintain composure is either very brave or very dangerous. Possibly both." Woo-sung's lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile, but close. "You're American. African American. Maria Washington. And you're Jang Woo-sung. I've heard of you. Then you know you should run." "I don't run from good business opportunities. And something tells me knowing you could be very good for business." That night, Maria didn't just help him get medical attention. She used her connections to secure a safe route out of the area, made calls to her contacts to determine who was hunting him, and provided intelligence that helped him avoid 3 more ambushes before dawn. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. By sunrise, they were in a safe house on the outskirts of Seoul, and Woo-sung was looking at her with newfound respect. "You're either fearless or insane," he said. "I'm practical. You needed help. I provided it. Now you owe me a favor." Maria poured herself tea from the pot she'd prepared. "Consider it an investment in future business relations." "What kind of business?" "The legitimate kind. I move luxury goods through Asia. Sometimes those goods need special handling, special routes, special protection. You have resources I don't. I have international connections you need." Woo-sung studied her for a long moment. "You're proposing a business partnership with a man you just watched kill 3 people tonight. I'm proposing a mutually beneficial arrangement with a man who's smart enough to survive when lesser men would have died. There's a difference." That business partnership became something neither of them had planned. Over the following months, Maria's import business flourished with Woo-sung's protection. His legitimate operations gained international reach through her connections. They met regularly to discuss logistics, strategy, expansion. And somewhere between contract negotiations and late-night planning sessions, business became personal. 3 months after they met, Woo-sung invited her to dinner. Not a business meeting, an actual date. "This is inappropriate," Maria said, though she was already reaching for her coat. "Probably. Will you come anyway?" "I'm a businesswoman, Woo-sung. Mixing business with pleasure is dangerous. Everything about me is dangerous. That hasn't stopped you yet." She went, and that dinner became 2. 2 became regular meetings that had nothing to do with shipping routes and everything to do with discovering each other beyond the boardroom. And late-night conversations became something neither of them could resist. 6 months after they met, Woo-sung told her the full truth about his organization, the scope of it, the reach, the things he'd done to build and maintain his empire. They were in his penthouse, overlooking the Han River, and his confession was raw and honest. "I won't apologize for what I am," he said, "but I want you to know everything before this goes any further. I'm involved in things that would shock you, things that probably should frighten you. I'm not a good man, Maria." "Do you hurt innocent people?" she asked. The question seemed to surprise him. "No, never." "Do you protect the people who work for you?" "With my life." "Do you keep your word?" "Always." Maria looked out at the river, its surface reflecting the city lights. "Then you're not as bad as you think you are. Bad men don't ask these questions. They don't care about the answers." "You should run from me," Woo-sung said quietly. "Smart women run from men like me." Maria turned to face him. "I've built an international business from scratch in a male-dominated industry. I've negotiated with men who thought I was nothing more than a pretty face to dismiss. I've survived boardrooms that would eat most people alive. I don't run, Woo-sung. I assess risks and make calculated decisions." "And what's your calculation here?" "That you're worth the risk." The smile he gave her then was real, reaching his eyes in a way she suspected was rare for him. "You're extraordinary. I know. Try to remember that." 1 year after they met, Jang Woo-sung stood before his inner circle and announced his intention to marry Maria Washington. The reaction was immediate and hostile. "She's an outsider," Elder Kim stated, his face hard. "She doesn't understand our ways, our traditions. She's not even Korean." "She understands business better than anyone in this room," Woo-sung replied calmly. "She's tripled our legitimate operations in 12 months. She's earned her place." "Your mother will never accept this," another elder warned. "You know what she expects. What we all expect. Korean wife. Sons to carry on the bloodline. This is about legacy, Woo-sung. About family." Woo-sung's jaw tightened. "Maria is my choice. The only choice. Anyone who has a problem with that can leave this organization with my blessing." The silence that followed was heavy. Challenging Woo-sung's authority was dangerous, but tradition was tradition. Finally, Elder Park spoke, his voice measured and cold. "We won't stand in your way, but understand this, Woo-sung. If this marriage brings weakness to this organization, if it compromises what your father built, there will be consequences. And when your mother demands a grandson to carry the Jiang name, we will support her. This foreigner will need to prove herself worthy of the position you're giving her. She already has, Wu Song said firmly. To me, that's all that matters. But it wasn't. And deep down, even then, he knew it. The wedding was elegant but small. Maria's family didn't attend. Her mother had begged her not to go through with it, had cried on the phone for hours trying to convince her daughter that love wasn't enough when danger walked through the door every night. He's going to get you killed, baby girl, her mother had said. Or worse, you'll spend your life watching your back, never knowing if today's the day someone decides to hurt him by hurting you. I know the risks, Mama, Maria replied, but I love him, and he loves me. We're building something together, something real. Love don't stop bullets, Maria. Remember that. Standing in her designer white gown, exchanging vows with a man who controlled half of Seoul's underground economy, Maria remembered her mother's words. She remembered and chose Wu Song anyway. The first year of marriage was harder than Maria had anticipated. Not because of Wu Song, but because of everyone around him. His mother, Madame Jiang, made no secret of her disappointment. She refused to attend the wedding and wouldn't speak to Maria directly, communicating only through icy glances and pointed comments to others within Maria's hearing. I wonder if she even knows how to make proper Korean food, Madame Jiang would say to her friends during family gatherings. These foreign women think business success is enough. They don't understand duty to family. Maria learned to smile and stay silent. She'd faced worse in boardrooms full of men who dismissed her. She could handle a disapproving mother-in-law. What she wasn't prepared for was how Wu Song's world would test everything she believed about herself. The first raid happened 4 months into their marriage. Maria woke to men shouting, doors breaking, weapons drawn. Wu Song had pushed her toward the panic room, but she'd refused to hide while he faced the police alone. Instead, she'd stood beside him in the living room, her hand in his, facing down officers who treated them both like criminals. Nothing was found. Wu Song's lawyers arrived within minutes. But the message was clear. This was her life now. Uncertainty, danger, constant state of alert. You can still leave, Wu Song told her that night, holding her close in their bed. I would understand. This isn't the life you planned. I plan to build an empire, Maria replied. I'm doing that, just not the way I originally imagined. I'm not going anywhere. The first betrayal came from someone Wu Song trusted completely. His second-in-command had been stealing for months, slowly siphoning money and making deals with rivals. When the truth came out, the organization demanded traditional justice. Maria had found Wu Song in his study, staring at files that documented the betrayal. His face was stone, but she could see the hurt beneath. He was like my brother, Wu Song said quietly. I trusted him with everything. What are you going to do? What I have to do. Maria sat beside him. She didn't ask for details. She understood that some parts of his world she couldn't enter, shouldn't enter. But she stayed with him through the night, a silent presence while he made impossible choices. When he finally came to bed at dawn, she held him while he stared at the ceiling, and she didn't ask if the problem had been resolved. She already knew. This was love in the shadows. Not romantic dinners and simple joy, but standing beside someone even when you couldn't see the path forward. Being the light when everything else was dark. 2 years into their marriage, Maria discovered she was pregnant. She'd been feeling off for weeks, exhausted in a way her busy schedule couldn't fully explain. When the test came back positive, she sat in their bathroom for 20 minutes, staring at those 2 lines and trying to process the enormity of what they meant. A child. Their child. Growing in a world of danger and darkness, but also in a home filled with fierce protection and love. When she told Wu Song that evening, his reaction was everything she'd hoped for. He'd frozen, the glass of whiskey halfway to his lips, his eyes wide with wonder. You're sure? 3 tests, all positive. I'm sure. He'd set down the glass carefully, crossed the room, and pulled her into his arms with a gentleness that always surprised her. For all his hardness with the world, he was soft with her. We're having a baby, he whispered against her hair. We're having a baby, Maria confirmed. For 3 perfect months. Everything was right. Woo-sung attended every doctor's appointment. He read pregnancy books. He started making plans for a nursery, talking about schools and futures with an enthusiasm Maria had never seen in him. Then they found out the baby was a girl. The shift was subtle at first. Woo-sung smiled when the ultrasound technician announced it. He said all the right things. But Maria saw something flicker in his eyes, just for a moment. Disappointment? Concern? She couldn't be sure. A daughter, he said in the car afterward. We're having a daughter. Are you okay with that? Of course. Why wouldn't I be? But that night, she overheard him on the phone with Elder Kim. Yes, it's a girl. No, I'm not disappointed. What does it matter? There was a long pause. That's old-fashioned thinking. This is my child. I'll be happy regardless. Another pause, and his voice dropped lower. I understand the concern about lineage. But there's time. We're young. This is just the first. Maria's hand went to her belly protectively. The first. As if their daughter was just a starting point, not a complete miracle in herself. If this story is hitting different, smash that like button and let us know in the comments what you think happens next. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this journey. Their first daughter, Gia, was born on a spring morning. She came into the world screaming, fierce and strong, with a full head of dark curls and Maria's eyes. When the nurse placed her in Maria's arms, Maria felt her world reorganize around this tiny, perfect human. Woo-sung held his daughter for exactly 3 minutes. He smiled. He said she was beautiful. But his eyes kept darting to the door, where Maria knew the elders were waiting for news. I need to make some calls, he said, handing Gia back to Maria. Rest. I'll be back soon. He didn't return for 4 hours. When he did, his face was carefully neutral. Everyone's very happy, he said. My mother wants to meet her granddaughter. That's good. Yes, very good. But something had changed. Maria felt it in the careful distance he maintained, in the way he looked at Gia with love but also something else. Something that felt like regret. The first time she heard the whispers was at Gia's 1-month celebration. Traditional gifts, traditional ceremonies, traditional expectations. Madame Zhang held her granddaughter with cold formality, not the warmth Maria had hoped to see. She's healthy at least, Madame Zhang said to Elder Kim, loud enough for Maria to hear. Perhaps the next one will be a boy. Let's hope so, Elder Kim replied. A man needs sons. Daughters are a blessing. But sons carry the name forward. Maria's arms tightened around the gift she was holding. Woo-sung was across the room, and he'd clearly heard the comment, but he said nothing. Did nothing. Just continued his conversation as if his mother hadn't just dismissed their daughter's worth. That night, Maria confronted him. You let them talk about Gia like she's not enough. Like she's a disappointment. I didn't let them do anything. They have their opinions. I can't control that. You can defend your daughter. You can tell your mother that Gia is perfect exactly as she is. Woo-sung's jaw tightened. Maria, you don't understand the pressure I'm under. This organization has traditions. Expectations. I understand that your mother just implied our daughter is inadequate because she's not a boy. I understand that you stood there and said nothing. What do you want me to do? Start a war with my own mother over comments. I want you to protect your daughter's dignity. That's what fathers do. They didn't speak for 2 days after that fight. Woo-sung threw himself into work. Maria threw herself into motherhood. And the distance between them grew. When Gia was 18 months old, Maria discovered she was pregnant again. This time there was less joy and more anxiety. Woo-sung's first question, after the initial surprise, was telling. Do you think it's a boy? Not are you happy, or how are you feeling? Just that one question that revealed everything. I don't know, Maria said quietly. Does it matter? No, of course not. I'm just curious. But they both knew it mattered. It mattered to his mother. It mattered to the elders. And somewhere along the way it had started to matter to him too. The second daughter, Minji, was born in autumn. She was quieter than Gia, more contemplative, with Woo-sung's serious eyes and Maria's stubborn chin. Beautiful. Perfect. Another girl. Woo-sung held her for 2 minutes this time. He said she was lovely. Then he excused himself to take a phone call that couldn't wait. Maria sat in the hospital bed, holding her newborn daughter, and felt something crack inside her chest. Not break, not yet, but crack. The whispers got louder after Minji's birth. No longer just whispers, really. Madame Zhang made her disappointment clear. 2 girls, she said to Maria during a family dinner, her tone sharp. In my day, a woman who couldn't give her husband sons was considered a failure. Times change, but nature doesn't. Perhaps you should see a specialist. Perhaps, Maria replied evenly, though inside she was screaming. Or perhaps Woo-sung and I are perfectly happy with our daughters. Are you? Madame Zhang's eyes were cold. Because my son doesn't seem happy at all lately. He works all hours. He's distant. A man needs a son to feel complete. To feel his legacy is secure. Woo-sung, sitting at the head of the table, said nothing. He cut his food and ate in silence, as if his mother hadn't just attacked his wife in front of the entire family. That night, Maria didn't wait for him to come to bed. She found him in his study, staring at paperwork he wasn't actually reading. Your mother attacked me tonight, and you said nothing. She's from a different generation. Her views are old-fashioned. I don't care about her views. I care that you didn't defend me. You didn't defend our daughters. You just sat there like a statue. Woo-sung finally looked up, and there was real pain in his eyes. What do you want from me, Maria? To disrespect my mother in front of everyone? To start a family war? I want you to act like you still love me. Like you still want this family we're building. I do love you. I love our girls. But nothing. There's no but. There's always a but with you now. You love us, but we're not what you wanted. We're not enough. That's not fair. Fair. Maria's voice rose despite her effort to stay calm. You know what's not fair? Having a husband who looks at his daughters like they're consolation prizes. Who lets his mother treat his wife like a breeding failure. That's what's not fair. They fought properly for the first time that night. Loud. Raw. All the frustration and hurt that had been building for 2 years came pouring out. And when it was over, when they were both exhausted and empty, nothing was resolved. They just went to bed on opposite sides and stared at the ceiling until dawn. 3 years passed. Maria threw herself into raising Jia and Minji, building routines and creating a home filled with love even as the emotional distance between her and Woo-sung grew. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't neglectful. He was just absent. Physically present but emotionally somewhere else. Then Maria got pregnant for the 3rd time. She didn't tell Woo-sung immediately. She sat with the knowledge for 3 days, trying to process her own complicated feelings. Part of her was happy. She loved being a mother. But another part dreaded what would come if this baby was also a girl. The disappointment, the increased pressure, the growing certainty that she would never be enough for this family she'd married into. When she finally told him, Woo-sung's reaction was carefully controlled. Another baby. That's wonderful. Is it? Of course. Why wouldn't it be? Maria looked at him across the kitchen table where they'd once planned dreams together. Because you hope it's a boy. Because your mother hopes it's a boy. Because everyone in your organization is watching and waiting and judging. Maria, don't lie to me, Woo-sung. We've been married long enough. I know when you're being honest and when you're performing. He was silent for a long moment. Then quietly, I do hope it's a boy. I'm sorry, but I do. That doesn't mean I won't love this child regardless. At least he was finally being honest. It didn't make it hurt less, but at least it was truth. Their 3rd daughter, Sua, was born in winter. She arrived 3 weeks early, tiny and determined, with a cry that could wake the entire hospital floor. She was fierce from the start, demanding attention and affection with an intensity that made Maria laugh even through her exhaustion. Woo-sung didn't even come to the hospital for 2 hours after being called. When he finally arrived, he looked at Sua through the nursery window, and his face was completely blank. Another girl, he said. Not a question. A statement. Flat. Empty. Her name is Sua. Don't you want to hold her? I have meetings. I just wanted to make sure you were both safe. He left before Maria could respond. just turned and walked away from the window, from his newborn daughter, from his wife who had just spent 18 hours in labor. Maria stood there holding Sua, watching him disappear down the corridor, and felt that crack in her chest widen into something that might never heal. The elders came to the hospital, not to celebrate, to convey disappointment disguised as concern. 3 daughters, Elder Park said. His tone implying this was somehow Maria's personal failure. This is becoming worrisome, Mrs. Zhang. Your husband needs an heir, a son to carry on the family legacy. I've given him 3 healthy, beautiful children, Maria replied, her voice steady despite the rage burning in her chest. If that's not enough, perhaps the problem isn't with me. The elder's eyes narrowed. Careful, Mrs. Zhang. Disrespect won't help your position. Neither will pretending I haven't noticed how this family treats my daughters like disappointments. Sua is 2 hours old, and you're already here making her existence about what she's not instead of celebrating what she is. We're thinking of the future. So am I. And I'm starting to think my daughter's future would be better somewhere away from people who can't see their worth. It was the first time Maria had said it out loud. The first time she'd admitted that leaving was even an option. Elder Park clearly heard it too, because his expression shifted from dismissive to alert. Don't make rash decisions, Mrs. Zhang. Marriages like yours are complicated. Ending them would be difficult for everyone. It wasn't a threat. Not exactly. But it wasn't not a threat either. Maria didn't respond. She just turned and walked back to her room, where Sua was sleeping in her bassinet, tiny and perfect and already loved by a mother who would do anything to protect her. The next 2 years were a slow erosion. Wu Song became more distant. His mother became more vocal in her criticism. The elders watched and waited and made their opinions clear in 1,000 small ways. And Maria felt herself hardening, building walls around her heart brick by brick. She still loved Wu Song. That was the tragedy of it. She still remembered the man who had looked at her like she was extraordinary, who had built dreams with her, who had promised her forever. But that man was disappearing, replaced by someone who looked at their daughters and saw only what they weren't instead of all they were. When Maria discovered she was pregnant for the 4th time, she cried. Not from happiness, from exhaustion, from fear, from the certain knowledge that if this baby was another girl, something would break that couldn't be fixed. She was 6 weeks along when she told Wu Song. They were in his study, the same room where so many difficult conversations had happened, and his reaction was almost painful in its restraint. 4th time, he said. Maybe this time. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. And if it's not? Maria asked. If this baby is another daughter, what then? Do we keep trying until you get what you want? Do I keep having babies until one of them is born with the right chromosome? That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair anymore, Wu Song. I've given you 3 incredible daughters. 3 smart, beautiful, strong girls who deserve a father who looks at them with pride instead of disappointment. But you can't even do that, can you? You can't see past what they're not to appreciate what they are. I love our daughters. But you don't want them. That's what you said to me 3 years ago, and it's still true. You love them, but you don't want them. You want something else. Wu Song's hands clenched on his desk. I'm doing my best, Maria. I'm trying to balance family expectations with my own desires. It's not as simple as you make it sound. It is exactly that simple. Either you choose your daughters and me, or you choose your mother's expectations and the elders' approval. You can't have both. I shouldn't have to choose. But you do. That's what you don't understand. Every day you stay silent when your mother criticizes me. Every time you look disappointed when someone mentions our girls. Every moment you spend wishing for something different, you're choosing. You're just choosing them. They didn't fight that night. The fight had gone out of both of them. They just sat in that study, on opposite sides of the desk that had come to represent everything wrong between them, and let the silence say what words couldn't. This is where it all starts to fall apart. If you're still with us, drop a comment letting us know you're hooked. And hit that subscribe button because you need to see how this ends. The 4th pregnancy was difficult. Maria was older now, more tired, carrying the weight of 3 daughters and a marriage that was dying by inches. The doctor put her on bed rest for the final trimester. Wusong hired nurses to help, but he himself was rarely home. "Where do you go?" Maria asked him one night when he came home at 2 a.m. "Work. Where else? I don't know anymore. You're a stranger to me now. To all of us." He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw something in his eyes that might have been regret, or maybe just exhaustion. "I'm doing what I have to do to keep this organization running, to keep us safe and secure. We're not safe. We're falling apart. And you're not even here to see it happen." But he still wasn't there. For the remaining weeks of her pregnancy, Maria was effectively alone. Jia, now 8 years old, helped with her younger sisters. Minji, 6, was old enough to understand something was wrong between her parents. Even Sua, at 3, had started asking why Daddy didn't play with them anymore. "Daddy's busy," Maria would say, over and over like a mantra. "He loves you very much. He's just busy." But love without presence was just a word. And her daughters were learning that lesson far too early. When Maria went into labor with their 4th child, she called Wusong. He didn't answer. She called again. No answer. Finally, she called his assistant. "He's in a meeting, Mrs. Zhang. I'll let him know it's urgent." "I'm having a baby, Sunho. It's not urgent. It's happening now." The assistant promised to find him. Maria went to the hospital with her mother-in-law's driver and a nurse. She labored alone for 4 hours before Wusong arrived, and when he did, his face was already resigned. "Another girl," the doctor announced when their 4th daughter entered the world. Healthy and beautiful. This time, Wusong didn't even try to hide his disappointment. He looked at the baby the nurse held up, looked at Maria, and his expression was empty. "4 daughters," he said. "4. Her name is Hannah," Maria replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "It means 1 in Korean, number 1, because she's perfect, just like her sisters." "Maria, get out." "What?" "Get out of this room. I don't want you here. I don't want our daughter's first moments in this world to be tainted by your disappointment. You're being emotional. You just gave birth. I'm being a mother. I'm protecting my daughter from a father who can't even look at her with love. So get out. Now." Wusong stood frozen for a moment. Then he turned and walked out without another word. Maria held Hannah close and let herself cry. Not from pain. Not from exhaustion. From the final, complete shattering of her heart. In the corridor outside, Wusong stood against the wall and tried to breathe through the crushing weight on his chest. He knew he should go back. He knew he should hold his daughter, comfort his wife, be the man Maria needed him to be. But all he could hear were the elders' voices, his mother's disappointment, the whispers that followed him everywhere about his inability to produce a male heir, the traditional expectations that had been pounded into him since childhood. A son carries the family name. A son inherits the empire. A son proves a man's worth. For daughters, and he felt like he'd failed at the most basic requirement of his position. Elder Kim found him there 20 minutes later. "Another girl," Wusong said. "It wasn't a question. I heard. This is becoming a serious problem, Wusong. The organization is talking. Your mother is beside herself. There are whispers that perhaps your wife is cursed." "She's not cursed. She's..." Wusong stopped. What was Maria? Extraordinary. Strong. The best partner he'd ever had. The woman he'd chosen against all advice because she made him believe in something beyond power. And he was destroying her because she couldn't give him the one thing his pride demanded. "4 daughters is enough," Elder Kim said quietly. "No one will blame you for seeking another wife. One who can give you sons. This American woman has proven she cannot fulfill that role. It's time to cut losses and move forward. She's my wife. She was your wife. Now she's an obstacle to your legacy. Think practically, Wusong. You're not getting younger. You need an heir. A real heir." The words settled into Wusong's mind like poison. He wanted to reject them, wanted to tell Elder Kim he was wrong. But the voice in his head that sounded increasingly like his mother's kept asking, "What if he's right? 4 daughters, 8 years, no sons." Maybe it was time to admit defeat and make a hard choice. That night, while Maria slept with Hannah in her arms, exhausted from labor and heartbreak, Woo-sung sat in the hospital cafeteria and made a decision that would destroy everything he'd built with her. He would ask for a divorce. Maria stayed in the hospital for 3 days. Woo-sung visited twice, both times brief and formal. He held Hannah for exactly 90 seconds during the second visit, his face carefully neutral, before handing her back to Maria. "We need to talk," he said. "When you're recovered. Talk now. You just gave birth. You need rest. I need to know what you're thinking, what you're planning." Maria's eyes were sharp despite her exhaustion. "You've made a decision. I can see it on your face." Woo-sung met her gaze, and for a moment, she saw the man she'd fallen in love with, the one who'd looked at her like she was extraordinary. But then his expression hardened, and that man disappeared again. "When you come home, we'll discuss the future. I don't want to have this conversation in a hospital." "The future?" Maria repeated softly. "You mean the end?" He didn't deny it. He just left. Maria held Hannah closer, breathing in that perfect new baby smell, and felt the last thread of hope snap. She'd known this was coming, had felt it building for years, but knowing didn't make it hurt less. The nurses brought her older daughters to visit that afternoon. Jia, Minji, and Sua crowded around the hospital bed, eager to meet their new sister. Their excitement was pure and beautiful, untainted by the disappointment that seemed to follow them everywhere else. "She's so tiny," Jia said, gently touching Hannah's hand. "Can I hold her?" "Of course, sweetheart." Maria carefully transferred the baby to her eldest daughter's arms. "Support her head. Just like that. Perfect." Jia looked down at her sister with such love that Maria's heart ached. "I'll protect you," Jia whispered to Hannah. "All of us will. You're going to have the best sisters in the world." "The best and only sisters," Minji added, pressing close to see. "Papa wanted a brother for us, but I like sisters better anyway." The innocence of that statement cut deep. Her daughters already knew, already understood that they weren't what their father wanted, and they'd learned to armor themselves against that rejection by finding worth in each other. "You girls are everything," Maria told them, her voice thick with emotion. "Never forget that. You're smart and strong and wonderful exactly as you are." "We know, Mama," Sua said, patting Maria's hand. "You tell us all the time." But Maria could see the question in Jia's eyes, the one that asked, "If we're so wonderful, why doesn't Papa think so? Why does Grandma look at us like we're disappointments? Why do the elders whisper when we walk past?" Questions Maria couldn't answer, not in ways that would make sense to an 8-year-old. When they brought her home 5 days later, Woo-sung was waiting in his study, not at the door to greet them, not in the nursery they'd prepared for Hannah. In his study, surrounded by the trappings of power and control, ready to deliver the blow he'd been planning. Maria settled Hannah in the nursery first, made sure her other daughters were occupied, then went to face him. She didn't knock, just opened the door and walked in. Woo-sung stood by the window, his back to her, and the tension in his shoulders told her everything. "Say it," Maria said. "Whatever you've decided, just say it." He turned, and his face was that carefully blank mask she'd come to hate. "I want a divorce." The words hit like physical blows, even though she'd been expecting them. Knowing something was coming didn't make the impact any less devastating. "Because I gave you daughters instead of sons. Because in 8 years we haven't had a male heir. Because the organization needs stability and succession planning. Because—" "Stop." Maria held up her hand. "Don't insult me with corporate language. This isn't a business decision. This is you choosing pride over family, tradition over love, your mother's approval over your wife and children. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. I understand perfectly. You're weak." The word hung in the air between them. "You let other people's opinions matter more than your own family. You let your mother and those elders poison your mind until you started seeing your own daughters as failures. That's weakness, Woo-sung, not strength." His jaw tightened. "I need a son." "No, you need a spine. You need the courage to tell your mother and those old men that your daughters are your legacy. That 4 brilliant, beautiful girls are worth more than some outdated notion of male succession. But you don't have that courage, do you? This isn't about courage. It's about responsibility. about what's required of me as the head of this organization. It's about ego, about your pride being hurt because you can't handle the idea that maybe daughters are just as valuable as sons. That maybe the problem isn't me failing to give you a male heir, but you failing to see the worth of the heirs you already have. For the first time, Wusong's mask cracked. I love my daughters. But you don't want them. You said it yourself, remember? 8 years ago, on a perfect night when I thought we were building something real. You said you wanted children. You said you wanted a family. But you meant a specific kind of family. One with at least one son to validate your existence. And I couldn't give you that, so now I'm disposable. You're not disposable. You'll be provided for. The girls. Don't. Maria's voice was sharp. Don't you dare try to make this sound noble. You're abandoning your family because we don't fit the image you want. That's not noble. That's cowardice. Maria, I saved your life. Remember? When we met, I could have walked away and let you bleed out in that restaurant. But I didn't. I helped you. I stood beside you through everything. Police raids, betrayals, attempts on your life. I gave up my career, my country, my family for you. I built your legitimate empire while you built your underground one. I gave you 8 years and 4 children and all my love. And you're throwing it away because of what's between their legs. The words were raw, brutal, but they needed to be said. Maria had spent 8 years being diplomatic, being understanding, being patient. But there was no patience left. Just rage and heartbreak. My lawyers will contact you tomorrow, Wusong said, his voice cold again. You'll be well compensated. The girls will remain in my custody until we finalize arrangements. No. What? I said no. I'm taking my daughters and leaving tonight. You don't get to keep them while you parade your next wife around. You don't get to damage them any more than you already have. They're my daughters too. Then act like it. Tell me right now that you look at them and see anything other than disappointment. Tell me you love them for who they are, not in spite of what they're not. Tell me you'd choose them over a son if you had to make that choice. Wusong opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, but no words came out, and that silence was Maria's answer. That's what I thought, she said quietly. Don't worry, I'll make this easy for you. I'll take the girls and disappear. You can tell everyone I left you. Blame me. Make me the villain. I don't care anymore. But you will never see my daughters again. You lost that right the moment you decided they weren't enough. Maria, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. I'm protecting my children from a father who doesn't value them. That's the most reasonable thing I've ever done. She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. You'll regret this. Walking away from this life, this security. You'll have nothing. Maria looked back at him over her shoulder. I'll have my daughters, and they'll have a mother who chose them. That's everything. She walked out of his study for the last time and didn't look back. The next 3 hours were a blur of quiet, efficient packing. Maria didn't take much. Clothes for her and the girls. Important documents she'd kept in a safe place. The money she'd secretly been setting aside in an account Wusong didn't know about. Years of business experience had taught her to always have an exit strategy. Jia watched with wide, understanding eyes as Maria moved through the house. We're leaving, aren't we? Her eldest daughter asked. Yes, baby. We're leaving. Because of Papa? Maria knelt down to eye level with her 8-year-old. Because sometimes families need to make hard choices. And I'm choosing to take you girls somewhere we can be happy. Somewhere no one will make you feel like you're not enough. I think Papa's sad, Jia said quietly. He just doesn't know how to show it. The wisdom in those words nearly broke Maria. Maybe. But his sadness doesn't mean we have to stay and be hurt by it. Okay, Mama. I'll help pack. By midnight they were ready. 1 suitcase each for the girls. 2 for Maria. Everything that mattered fit into 5 bags and a secure carrier for Hannah. The driver Wusong had assigned to Maria was loyal to money, not tradition. She paid him triple to take them to a hotel and keep his mouth shut for 24 hours. He agreed without hesitation. You're making the right choice, Mrs. Zhang, he said as he loaded their bags. I've watched him break your spirit piece by piece. Better to leave before there's nothing left. Thank you, Jin Ho. Where will you go? Away. That's all you need to know. She'd already made the arrangements. Her old business contacts in Singapore had helped set up temporary housing. Her former mentor had secured her a position at an international consulting firm. She had enough money to last 6 months if she was careful. After that, she'd figure something out. She always did. As the car pulled away from the house, Maria looked back one last time. Somewhere in there was the man she'd loved. The man she'd built dreams with. The man who'd chosen pride over love and destroyed them both in the process. "Goodbye, Wu Song," she whispered. "I hope one day you understand what you lost." The divorce papers arrived at the hotel 3 days later. Wu Song's lawyers had moved quickly, eager to resolve what they saw as a simple business transaction. Dissolution of marriage, division of assets, custody arrangements. Maria read through them with the sharp eye of a former businesswoman. They were generous, she had to admit. A substantial settlement, continued financial support for the girls, visitation rights that were flexible and reasonable. Everything a divorcing wife could want. Except the one thing that actually mattered, acknowledgement that she and her daughters had value beyond their ability to produce male heirs. She signed them without emotion and sent them back with amendments. She kept the financial support for the girls, they deserved that, but refused the settlement for herself. She also added a clause that visitation would only occur if Wu Song personally requested it and the girls agreed. She wouldn't force her daughters to spend time with a father who'd made them feel inadequate. The lawyers tried to negotiate. Maria refused every call. Either they accepted her terms or she'd fight this in court. And she had enough dirt on Wu Song's organization to make that battle very public and very ugly. They accepted her terms. 6 weeks after she'd walked out, the divorce was finalized. Maria was officially no longer Mrs. Jiang. She was just Maria Washington again. A single mother of 4 with no country to call home and an uncertain future ahead. But when she looked at her daughters, sleeping peacefully in their small hotel suite, she didn't feel uncertain. She felt free. Now comes the part where everything he built starts crumbling. If you want to see karma in action, you need to stay until the end. Hit that subscribe button right now so you don't miss what happens next. Maria's first priority was stability. The hotel was temporary, expensive, and too unstable for 4 young girls who'd already been through too much upheaval. She needed a permanent home, a real foundation to build on. Singapore became that foundation. It was far enough from Seoul to feel like a fresh start, but still in Asia where her business connections remained strong. She found a modest apartment in a good neighborhood with excellent schools. It wasn't the mansion she'd left behind, but it was theirs. Clean, safe, free from judgment. The consulting firm that hired her appreciated her international experience and language skills. Within 3 months, she was managing major clients. Within 6 months, she was being courted by larger firms. Within a year, she'd started her own consultancy, leveraging everything she'd learned during her years building Wu Song's legitimate empire. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent 8 years making him money, expanding his reach, creating opportunities. Now she was doing the same thing for herself, and the profits went directly to securing her daughters' futures. But the real work was emotional, not financial. Jia struggled the most initially. At 8, she remembered everything. The big house, the staff, the sense of being part of something important even if that importance came with conditions. She missed her father despite everything, missed the idea of him more than the reality. "Why doesn't Papa call?" she asked Maria one night, 6 months into their new life. "Because he's letting us have space to heal. Or because he doesn't care about us." Maria pulled her daughter close. "He cares. He's just broken in ways I couldn't fix. Some people don't know how to love what they have. They're always looking for something else, something they think will make them complete. That's not about you or your sisters. That's about him. I wish I could fix him." "Oh, sweetheart, you can't fix people who don't think they're broken. All you can do is protect yourself and choose your own path." Minji adapted more easily. At 7, she was young enough to embrace the adventure of a new country, new school, new friends. She learned English quickly, made friends with children from a dozen different countries, and thrived in the international school Maria had chosen. "I like it here," Minji announced one day. "Nobody cares that we don't have a brother. Nobody asks weird questions about why our family is small. Good, Maria replied, because your family isn't small. You have 3 sisters and a mother who would move mountains for you. That's not small. That's mighty. Sua, only 3 when they left, had the easiest transition because she remembered the least. Korea became a distant dream, barely more real than a fairy tale. She adapted to Singapore like she'd always lived there, chattering in English and Korean and Mandarin with equal ease. And Hannah grew up not knowing anything else. For her, this was normal. A mother who worked hard and loved fiercer. 3 older sisters who protected and guided and played with her. A small apartment that was warm and safe even if it wasn't grand. The girls became each other's world. Jia, the natural leader, took her role as eldest seriously. Minji became the mediator, smooth conflicts with humor and diplomacy. Sua was their wild card, fearless and loud and unapologetically herself. And Hannah, the baby, learned from all of them, absorbing their strengths and developing her own. Maria watched them become remarkable young women and felt vindicated in her choice every single day. Without the weight of patriarchal expectations, without the constant message that they were somehow inadequate, her daughters flourished. Jia discovered a gift for mathematics and strategy. She joined the school's debate team and won regional competitions. Minji gravitated toward languages and international relations, speaking 5 languages fluently by age 13. Sua found her voice in art, creating bold pieces that caught the attention of local galleries. And Hannah, as she grew, showed signs of being the most brilliant of them all, curious about everything, questioning everything, never accepting because I said so as an answer. They were extraordinary, and they knew it because Maria told them every single day. While Maria built a new life with her daughters halfway across Asia, Wusong's world was falling apart. The first crack appeared 6 months after the divorce. One of his key distributors, a relationship Maria had personally cultivated and maintained, suddenly pulled out of their contract. When Wusong investigated, he discovered that Maria had been the one managing that relationship all along. Without her, there was no trust, no rapport, no reason for the distributor to risk association with an underground organization. She was handling it? Wusong asked his assistant, incredulous. For 5 years, sir. All the international contracts. She managed them personally while you were focused on domestic operations. 5 years. 5 years of Maria quietly building the foundation of his legitimate empire while he took credit for the success. The second crack came in the form of his mother's suggestion. You need to remarry, Madame Zhang stated firmly. Quickly. A proper Korean woman this time. Someone who understands her duty. I just got divorced. Exactly. The longer you wait, the older you get. You're not young anymore, Wusong. If you want sons, you need to start now. The thought of remarrying so soon made Wusong's stomach turn. But the elders agreed with his mother. They presented him with options, daughters of allied families, women from good bloodlines, candidates who would be honored to marry into the Zhang organization. He chose Minhee because she was quiet, because she smiled when expected to and didn't ask difficult questions, because she was nothing like Maria, and maybe that was exactly what he needed. They married 8 months after his divorce was finalized. It was a traditional ceremony, full of the pomp and ritual that his first wedding had lacked. Madame Zhang was radiant. The elders were satisfied. Everyone congratulated Wusong on finally making a proper choice. Everyone except Wusong himself. On his wedding night, he stood on the balcony of his bedroom and thought about Maria, wondered where she was, how the girls were doing, if Jia still loved mathematics, if Minji had mastered Mandarin, if Sua was still painting everything she saw, if Hannah had her first words yet. He'd made no effort to contact them. Maria had made it clear that he'd lost that right, and part of him agreed with her. What could he say? Sorry I made you and our daughters feel inadequate for 8 years. But I've realized my mistake now that you're gone. Too little, too late. Are you coming to bed? Minhee called from inside. Wusong turned from the balcony, looked at his new wife waiting in their bed, and felt absolutely nothing. No desire, no affection, just emptiness. But he'd made this choice. Now he had to live with it. The third crack came from Minhee herself. She was exactly what the elders had wanted, traditional, obedient, focused on producing an heir. But she was also something Woo Song hadn't anticipated, greedy. Within 3 months of marriage, money started disappearing from accounts Maria used to manage. Small amounts at first, then larger sums. When Woo Song confronted Min Hee, she was all innocence. I needed new clothes for the charity events. Your mother said it was appropriate. 5 million won for clothes? Your first wife had an entire wardrobe. Was I not supposed to match her standard? The mention of Maria stung. Maria earned her own money. She had her own business. Well, I'm not a businesswoman. I'm your wife. Isn't providing for me your responsibility? She had him there. Traditional expectations went both ways. But the money kept disappearing, and Woo Song started to realize that Min Hee's quiet obedience came with a price tag. A year into his second marriage, Min Hee got pregnant. The entire organization celebrated. Finally, an heir was coming. Surely this time it would be a boy. Woo Song felt nothing but anxiety. Not joy, not hope, just a gnawing certainty that something was wrong. The baby was a girl. When the doctor announced it, Woo Song felt the room tilt. Another daughter, his fifth daughter, and the realization that slammed into him with devastating force. Maybe the problem wasn't with Maria. Maybe it was with him. He barely saw Min Hee or the new baby, whom she named Yuna, without consulting him. He threw himself into work, trying to outrun the thoughts that chased him through every quiet moment. But the thoughts caught up anyway, usually at 3 a.m. when sleep wouldn't come and the silence was too loud. 4 daughters with Maria. 1 daughter with Min Hee. 5 girls. No sons. The pattern was clear. And yet he'd blamed Maria. Divorced her. Destroyed their family because he'd been so certain the failure was hers. What if it wasn't? What if he was the reason his bloodline would end with daughters? This question ate at him like acid. But pride kept him from seeking answers. To get tested would be to admit doubt. To admit he might have been wrong about everything. So he stayed silent and watched his empire continue to crumble. The 4th crack was the biggest. Betrayal from within. Min Hee's brother, whom Woo Song had brought into the organization as a gesture of goodwill, was stealing. Not small amounts like his sister. Millions. He was also feeding information to rival organizations, slowly dismantling everything Woo Song had built. When the truth came out, it was devastating. Half of Woo Song's inner circle had known and said nothing, either out of fear or because they were complicit. The trust he'd spent 20 years building was gone. You've become weak, Elder Park told him during the meeting where the betrayal was revealed. Ever since you divorced that American woman, nothing has gone right. Your new wife is a parasite. Her family is dismantling your organization from the inside. And still no son. Maybe the problem isn't your wives, Woo Song. Maybe it's you. The words were meant to cut, and they succeeded. Woo Song sat in that meeting and felt the full weight of his failures. His organization was bleeding money and loyalty. His second marriage was a transaction that had backfired spectacularly. His mother, who'd pushed so hard for all of this, had grown frail and bitter, constantly comparing everything to how it was when your father was alive. And somewhere in Singapore, Maria was thriving without him. He knew because he'd hired someone to check on them. Not to interfere, he'd promised himself he wouldn't do that. But just to know they were okay. They were more than okay. They were flourishing. Maria had built a successful business. The girls were in excellent schools, earning top marks, involved in activities, surrounded by friends. They looked happy in the photos his investigator had provided. Genuinely, radiantly happy. Everything he'd thrown away was thriving without him. And everything he'd kept was falling apart. You're probably wondering if he figured it out yet. If he finally got what he deserved. Keep watching because the truth is about to hit him like a freight train. And if you're new here, subscribe now because this channel is all about stories where karma doesn't miss. The breaking point came 3 years after his divorce from Maria. Woo Song was 42 years old, trapped in a loveless marriage, watching his organization splinter, and haunted by memories of what he'd lost. Min Hee was pregnant again, and everyone was praying for a boy. But Woo Song couldn't shake the certainty that it wouldn't matter. That regardless of who he married or how many times he tried, the result would be the same. He went to a private doctor. Someone outside his organization who wouldn't gossip. Someone who could give him answers without judgment. I want a complete fertility workup, Wusong said. Everything. I need to know. The doctor, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a professional demeanor, nodded. This is a smart decision. Many couples struggle with gender selection, but understanding your reproductive health is always valuable. We'll test your sperm count, motility, and genetic factors. The tests took 2 weeks. Wusong waited in an agony of suspense, knowing that the results would either vindicate him or destroy the last of his illusions. When he returned for the results, the doctor's face was professionally neutral. I have good news and complicated news, she began. The good news is your sperm count and motility are excellent. You're very fertile. And the complicated news? The complicated news is about gender determination. You see, the father's sperm determines the sex of the child. The sperm carrying Y chromosomes produce males, and X chromosomes produce females. Your test results show an unusual ratio. You produce significantly more X chromosome sperm than Y chromosome sperm. Not 0Y, that would make male offspring impossible, but enough of an imbalance that female offspring are overwhelmingly more likely. The room seemed to spin. How much more likely? In your case? About an 85-15 ratio. For every 15 sperm carrying Y chromosomes, you have 85 carrying X chromosomes. It's rare but not unheard of. Some men have this genetic pattern. It's not a deficiency or a problem, just a variation. But it does mean that having male offspring would be statistically unlikely for you, regardless of your partner. Wusong sat in silence, processing this information. 85-15. Overwhelmingly likely to have daughters, regardless of partner. So all 5 of my daughters were not anyone's fault. Not yours for being unable to produce sons, not your wives for being unable to carry sons. Just genetics and probability working exactly as they should. Is there a treatment? Something that can change the ratio? The doctor shook her head gently. This is genetic, Mr. Zhang. It's part of who you are at the most fundamental level. There are some experimental procedures for gender selection, but they're expensive, not guaranteed, and honestly, I wouldn't recommend them. You've already proven you can have healthy children. Many couples can't even have that. Healthy children. 5 beautiful, brilliant daughters. All of them dismissed, undervalued, treated as disappointments because of something that was his genetic makeup, not their mother's failure. Wusong thanked the doctor and walked out into the Seoul afternoon feeling like someone had hollowed out his chest and filled it with broken glass. He'd destroyed his marriage to Maria for nothing. Blamed her for something that was never her fault. Made her feel inadequate when she'd given him exactly what his body was genetically predisposed to produce. She'd done nothing wrong. She'd been perfect. And he'd thrown her away because he couldn't handle the truth about himself. The girls. Jia, Minji, Sua, Hannah. He'd made them feel like they weren't enough when the truth was he had never been enough. He'd failed them as a father not because they were daughters but because he'd been too weak to see past centuries of tradition to recognize the gifts standing right in front of him. For the first time in 3 years, Wusong wept. Not silent tears, but gut-wrenching sobs that came from somewhere deep and irreparable. He sat in his car in the parking garage and cried for everything he'd lost. Everything he'd destroyed with his own hands. When Minhee gave birth 4 months later, the baby was another girl. Wusong wasn't surprised. He held his 6th daughter with a mixture of love and devastating regret. This baby, like all the others, was perfect. And like all the others, she deserved better than a father who'd spent so much time wanting something else. We'll try again, Minhee said from the hospital bed, her voice tight with disappointment. We're still young. We can keep trying for a son. Wusong looked at her, this woman he'd married for all the wrong reasons, and felt nothing but exhaustion. No, he said quietly. We won't. What? But we need. I need to fix what I broke. And I can't do that while pretending this is going to somehow be different. He filed for divorce the following week. Minhee was furious, claiming he'd promised her sons and status. Madame Zhang was devastated, unable to understand why her son kept making such terrible choices. The elders were openly discussing replacing him. Wusong didn't care anymore. Let them talk. Let them judge. He'd spent his entire adult life seeking their approval, and where had it gotten him? alone, childless in every way that mattered, because his actual children wanted nothing to do with him. 6 daughters existed in the world carrying his DNA, and not one of them called him father with any affection. That was his legacy. Not a male heir, not a business empire, just 6 girls who deserved so much better than what he'd given them. The question was it too late to change that? Wusong spent months trying to find Maria. He hired investigators, contacted old mutual acquaintances, followed every lead. She'd covered her tracks well, but eventually he found her. Singapore, a successful consulting business. For daughters in prestigious schools. He flew there without warning, without preparation. Just showed up at her office building and waited until she emerged at the end of the workday. Maria looked different. Older, yes, but also stronger. She wore her success like armor. Expensive suit, confident stride, the kind of presence that commanded respect. She looked like exactly who she'd always been. Extraordinary. When she saw him, she stopped. Her face showed no emotion, just cold assessment. "You have 10 seconds to tell me why you're here before I call security," she said. "I need to apologize. Your 10 seconds are up." She moved to walk past him. "I know why we had daughters," Wusong said quickly. "I had tests done. It's me. My genetics. There was never anything wrong with you. You didn't fail at anything. I failed. At everything. And I'm so sorry, Maria. I'm so desperately sorry." Maria stopped walking. For a long moment, she just stood there, her back to him. When she finally turned around, her eyes were hard. "You came all the way to Singapore to tell me something I figured out years ago? That you were the problem? I didn't need a doctor to tell me that, Wusong. I knew the moment you couldn't even look at Hannah. The moment you chose your pride over your family. I knew you were broken in ways I couldn't fix. I know. You were right about everything. I was weak. I let tradition and my mother and those elders poison my mind until I couldn't see what was right in front of me. For incredible daughters. A wife who would have stood beside me through anything. I destroyed it all. Yes, you did. Can I see them? The girls. No. The word was absolute. No hesitation, no room for negotiation. Maria, please. I know I don't deserve. You're right. You don't deserve anything from them. You made them feel inadequate for 8 years. You abandoned them because they weren't boys. You let your mother call me a failure in front of them. You think a late apology fixes that? No. But I want to try. I want them to know I'm sorry. That I was wrong about everything. Maria stepped closer, and her voice was low and furious. Do you know what Jia said to me last month? She said she's grateful you left us. Because watching you not love us was worse than you being gone. That's what you did, Wusong. You hurt them so deeply that your absence became a relief. The words were knives, but he deserved every cut. I can change. I have changed. I just need a chance. You had 8 years of chances. You had 4 perfect babies to love and protect. And you couldn't do it. Now you want me to hand them back so you can damage them more? So you can come in as the reformed father and feel better about yourself? No, absolutely not. They deserve to know their father. They deserve to be loved unconditionally. Something you proved you couldn't do. So no, you don't get to see them. You don't get to be in their lives. You don't get to fix your guilt by forcing your presence on children you abandoned. I have rights. And I have lawyers. Try to exercise those rights, and I will make every single thing you've ever done public. Every deal, every arrangement, every skeleton in your organization's closet. I'll destroy what's left of your empire and make sure the girls know exactly who their father really is. Is that what you want? Wusong stood there, defeated. She meant it, every word, and she had the power to do it. I just want them to know I'm sorry, he said quietly. They don't care. They've moved on. They're thriving without you. The best thing you can do for them is stay gone. Maria turned to leave, then paused one more time. You wanted to know if you could see them? She pulled out her phone, scrolled through photos, and turned the screen toward him. That's Jia. 15 now. Straight A's. Speaks 4 languages. Wants to be an international human rights lawyer. That's Minji. 13. Artist and budding entrepreneur. That's Sua. 11. Fearless. Top of her debate team. And that's Hannah. Brilliant, creative, already reading at a college level. Woo-sung stared at the images of his daughters. Grown, beautiful, confident, everything he'd missed. They're extraordinary, he whispered. I know. I raised them, without you, and they're better for it. Maria pocketed her phone. You wanted a son to carry your name. Instead, you destroyed 4 daughters who would have carried your heart. That's your legacy, Woo-sung. Live with it. She walked away then, and this time he didn't try to stop her. We're almost at the end of this journey. If you've made it this far, do me a favor, hit that like button and drop a comment telling us what you think about Woo-sung's ending. Does he deserve forgiveness? Let us know below. Jang Woo-sung returned to Seoul a broken man. Not broken by violence or business failure, but by the full weight of his choices. He'd gotten exactly what he deserved. Nothing. His empire continued to fracture. The elders eventually replaced him as head of the organization, citing his inability to maintain stability. Madame Jang passed away 2 years after his trip to Singapore, still disappointed in her son's failures. His second ex-wife sued for support and won, draining more of his dwindling resources. But none of that hurt as much as the photos he kept of his daughters. The private investigator still sent updates. Maria didn't know, and Woo-sung made sure it stayed that way. He didn't try to contact them, didn't violate the boundaries Maria had set, just watched from afar as they grew into remarkable women. Jia graduated top of her class and earned a full scholarship to Oxford. Minji started her own business at 17, using skills she'd learned from watching her mother. Sua won international art competitions. Hannah tested into gifted programs that usually only accepted students years older. They were everything he'd wanted in heirs and more. Smart, strong, capable, leaders in their own right. And none of them carried his name or his legacy because he'd been too blind to see their worth when it mattered. 5 years after Maria walked away from him in Singapore, Woo-sung received an invitation. It came to his apartment. Not the mansion he'd once owned, just a modest apartment in a middle-class neighborhood. The envelope was expensive, the calligraphy elegant. Inside was an invitation to Jia's college graduation ceremony at Oxford. No note, no explanation, just the invitation with his name on it. Woo-sung stared at it for 3 days, trying to understand. Was this Maria's doing? Jia's? A cruel joke? Or maybe, possibly, an olive branch? He flew to England not knowing what to expect. The ceremony was beautiful, hundreds of graduates in traditional robes, proud families everywhere. He sat in the back, away from everyone, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. He found them easily. Maria sat in the 3rd row, flanked by Minji, Sua, and Hannah. All of them wore elegant dresses, their heads close together as they whispered and laughed. They looked like a unit, complete without him. When Jia's name was called, they all stood and cheered. Maria's pride was visible from across the venue. Woo-sung felt his throat tighten watching them celebrate this moment he had no part in creating. After the ceremony, he lingered in the crowd, uncertain if he should approach. Then Jia appeared in front of him, her graduation robe billowing slightly in the breeze. You came, she said, not warmly but not coldly either, just factual. You invited me. I did. Against Mama's advice, actually. Jia crossed her arms, studying him with eyes too old for her 22 years. Do you know why? No. Because I wanted to see you one more time, to see if you'd changed. If you were still the man who couldn't look at us without disappointment. She tilted her head. What do you see when you look at me now? Woo-sung looked at his eldest daughter properly for the first time in over a decade. She was stunning, confident, accomplished, a woman who had become extraordinary despite him, not because of him. I see everything I threw away, he said honestly. I see a brilliant woman who deserved a better father. I see my greatest failure and my greatest loss. Jia's expression softened slightly. Do you regret it? Actually regret it. Every day, every moment. I would give anything to go back and be the father you deserved. But you can't. Time doesn't work that way. Jia glanced back at her mother and sisters. Mama said I shouldn't give you this opportunity, that you'd already proven who you were. But I needed to know for myself. I needed to hear you say it. Say what? That we were enough. That we always were. That the problem was never us. Wusong felt tears burning in his eyes. You were always enough. More than enough. You and your sisters are extraordinary. And I was too broken and too proud to see it. That's my failure. My shame. Not yours. Never yours. Jia nodded slowly. Thank you for saying that. I think I needed to hear it. Does this mean? No. She held up her hand gently. It doesn't mean you get to be in our lives. It doesn't mean forgiveness or second chances. It just means I heard you. And now I can move forward without wondering. Closure, I think they call it. Jia. I hope you find peace, Mr. Jiang. I really do. But you need to find it without us. We're doing fine. Better than fine. And we did it without you. That's how it needs to stay. She turned to leave, then looked back one final time. For what it's worth, I don't hate you. None of us do. Hate requires energy we don't want to spend. We've just moved on. I hope someday you can too. Then she walked back to her family, her real family, the one Maria had built from the ruins Wusong had created, and didn't look back. Wusong stood in that Oxford courtyard and watched them leave together. Maria's arm around Jia's shoulders. Minji making some joke that had them all laughing. Sua and Hannah walking close, heads bent together in sisterly conspiracy. They were complete without him. They'd healed without him. They'd become extraordinary despite him. And he would spend the rest of his life living with that truth. Two possible endings existed for Jiang Wusong's story. In one version, he returned to Seoul and died alone 3 years later. A heart attack in his apartment, found by a neighbor 2 days after the fact. His obituary mentioned his daughters briefly, clinical and cold. They didn't attend the funeral. His organization sent representatives out of obligation, not respect. In the other version, he lived. He stayed in England, got a modest job teaching Korean to foreign students, and from a distance watched his daughters build their lives. He never contacted them, never tried to force his way back in, just existed on the periphery, supporting them in the only way he could, by staying away and letting them thrive without his damage. Sometimes he'd see them in the news. Jia becoming a renowned human rights lawyer. Minji expanding her business internationally. Sua's art exhibited in major galleries. Hannah earning her doctorate at 23. In his small apartment, he kept photos of them on the wall. His 6 daughters, 4 with Maria, 2 with Minhee, though the youngest 2 he'd long since lost contact with. 6 brilliant girls who deserved better fathers than they'd gotten. On the wall opposite the photos, he kept a single quote he'd written in his own hand. I wanted a son to carry my name. Instead, I destroyed the daughters who carried my heart. It was his reminder, his penance, the truth he'd learned too late. The girls never forgave him. They didn't need to. Forgiveness required a relationship, and they'd moved past needing anything from him, including absolution for his failures. Maria eventually remarried, a kind man who loved her daughters like his own and never made them feel inadequate for existing. The girls called him by his first name out of respect for everyone's boundaries, but they let him be part of their lives in ways they'd never allowed Wusong. And in the end, that was the final, crushing irony. Wusong's obsession with blood and legacy and carrying forward a family name had cost him the only family that ever mattered. His daughters were thriving, building their own legacies, changing the world in their own ways. Just